Donk Nation, Jackson Jets, thanks for tuning in to your Daily Dose of Donkey with Ginger Nonsensical Steelers Talk. It's just your boy, the Viking Donkey, this week, but we got an Aaron Rodgers signing. We have a new schedule to look at. Tune in for all this awesome stuff to come after the intro.
Nonsensical Pittsburgh Steelers talk. Every single week we take that walk through the history, the present, and the future bright. Steel City stories shining ever so light. Yeah, Viking, Donkey, Gingy, Lasker, a legendary crew. Talking Steelers football through and through.
That's right, Jackson Jennets. We are here. It is Nonsensical, and we're here to talk about being reunited. But does it feel so good? That's really what the question is. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is back in Pittsburgh. Yes, he gets a substantial raise to upwards of $25 million, looks like 22 or so base, with a few million of incentives in there. But the question is, was this the right move for the Steelers? Should they have started a rebuild? I mean, moving on from Mike Tomlin, that seems like the obvious time to start a rebuild, to start anew. But anybody who looked at this objectively knew that this team was planning on Aaron Rodgers being back because the moves that were moves that, are for an old team to go one more time. Bringing back Cam Hayward, keeping TJ Watt, not moving on at the middle linebacker position from guys like Patrick Queen, trading for Michael Pittman Jr., the type of moves that really felt like this was a team that wanted to run it back at least one more time. And at this point, you just gotta say this is a team and an organization that has been fearing the rebuild. They want to stay in this perpetual state of purgatory, as we'll call it, where they're not bad enough to not be a playoff team, but they're not good enough to win a playoff game. Now, maybe that changes this year. Maybe the new moves to a new coach ignites something different. Maybe we see a different Aaron Rodgers than we saw last year, because in order for this team to be successful, that's what we're going to need to see. And obviously, the movement has to be more so Aaron Rodgers proving he still has something like Tom Brady when he went to Tampa after the years in New England. But the peripherals here are what are the scary points. And maybe it's a Mike Tomlin peripheral, and that's a very likely outcome because we know that Mike Tomlin feared the middle of the field, and we know that he'd like you to check it down and just play safe. But we have to see Aaron Rodgers become an effective quarterback. Last year, yes, between 11 and 20 yards, I think he was like a top 10 quarterback in almost every category when it comes to it. One of the best touchdown rates in that 11 to 20 yard window. But his deep passing window was almost non-existent and wasn't very successful when it was used. And checkdowns, I mean, that's what he led the league in, was throwing checkdowns. He didn't really one of the fewest amount of passes over the middle field, the most amount of checkdowns in terms of ratio among any quarterback in the NFL. Now, that's a common theme between quarterbacks and a Mike Tomlin system. Completely different system here. I don't know if we'll see more movement down the field. But when you look at Aaron Rodgers and you look at those MVP seasons of Green Bay, he was more willing to hold on to the ball. And yes, I know he had the 1 year at Pittsburgh, but put on his Jets tape and look at his Jets number. I mean, there's a reason Breece Hall had a jillion receiving yards because he always had the football. It's become, and I don't blame him, it's become Aaron Rodgers looks like the type of guy who doesn't have faith in his protection, and if he doesn't, he's going to get the ball out and live to see another day every time. And that can't be what we see this year. I understand the Steelers are afraid to rebuild. I understand they built this team to give Aaron Rodgers another go and to try to get McCarthy out on a early winning streak. But for that to happen, being reunited with Aaron Rodgers, we have to see a change in it. We have to see Aaron Rodgers being willing to be aggressive. We have to see McCarthy able to be aggressive, use the middle of the field, throw more passes down the field, and check down less often. And I honestly don't know if that's going to happen. And it's not anything to do with McCarthy. I don't think that's necessarily the system he's run. We've seen that before in Green Bay. We've seen it in Dallas. He's a running type of guy, but wants to take shots down the field. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is willing to do that at this stage of his career. Let's hope so, because if he is, maybe there is something magical here and the Steelers can go. Because once again, we're talking an AFC that the juggernauts, maybe they're showing a little sign of weakness here or there. Kansas City's defense definitely has some openings from what we saw before. New England was kind of a flash in the pan team that let's see if they can repeat it. And don't forget that New England team almost lost to Denver when Denver didn't have a quarterback who was worthy of being anything but a third stringer in the NFL at this point. So maybe the AFC is still open. And if it is, let's hope this team is set up now because we could be like, oh, this is what we should be doing. You know me, I've been talking about a rebuild since, a decade ago. And I still think the Steelers need to not be afraid of a rebuild. But at this point, and if you watched this offseason, you knew that wasn't going to happen. Even if they went with a young quarterback, there's too much money spent for this to be a true rebuild type of situation. So rebuild was put off before Rodgers signed. At this point, bringing in Rodgers gives you the best chance to win potentially. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm leaning more towards it's not. But he takes your chance of it being successful from like 15% to let's say 25%. So, you have a 1 in 4 chance that this thing works out well and we can finally get out of purgatory. I don't know. Maybe he'll be aggressive. Maybe the addition of new wide receivers, new head coach, new offense coordinator, new system will bring out life that we haven't seen in a while, and the Steelers team can be successful. Most likely scenario, you see a slightly elevated performance from the offense compared to what they did last year, but then you see a slightly worse performance from the defense, maybe, or maybe the same performance from the defense with a slightly elevated offense. We get to that 10, 11 win mark, maybe even a 12 win mark, get to the playoffs and just get outclassed again because a little step forward is not going to be enough. So if this team can stay healthy, which they did most of last year, because that's another big point is they really can't afford an injury in a key spot to a key starter because they don't have the depth to withstand that. We could argue whether or not the offensive line is better right now than it was last year. I personally do not see it that way. So when you look at this, is this team going to take that step forward? Is Aaron Rodgers going to help them take the step forward? I don't feel that way, but I do feel, just like I said before, he gives you the best chance of that going forward. And let's hope maybe McCarthy finds a little magic with him reunited. We've been talking about it, reunited. And I said, but does it feel so good? Maybe it will. Maybe this will be the magic this team needs. And who knows? Maybe it's a one and done for McCarthy and Rodgers in Pittsburgh. Maybe they go out, win a Lombardi, and are like, you know what? You can't go out any higher than that. And they both decide to call it quits. And then it really is full rebuildville for the Steelers. Who knows? That's the scenario I'm going to dream, I'm going to wish for. Of course, the NFL schedule also came out this week. Some fun stuff in there, getting to be the first game in Paris is going to be a little bit fun out there. Taking on the Browns after an international trip, not necessarily the most fun thing in the world, as that's a team that we tend to struggle with for no reason whatsoever. Don't need to give ourselves a reason. And of course, not playing Baltimore till the end of the season again is getting a little old. I've always said this. I feel your first 3 games should be division games and your last 3 games should be division games. I think that's the best way for the NFL to do it, but that's not the way we are. That's not the way things are going to work. So, you know, who do we give? Let's move on to shout-outs. Next week, hopefully we get Gingy back. We can talk about Rodgers. We can talk about the schedule. Maybe we'll even have, either next week or the week after, a breakdown of where I see the record going. Aaron Rodgers coming. I was going to have 2 different ones, with or without Rodgers, then he joined. So I'm like, I want to make it more interesting now since it's just with Rodgers and do a little more deep dive because now there aren't those crazy variables. So look for that in the next couple weeks. Gingy reaction to all this. We'll move on to a shout-out. I got to give a shout out to whichever quarterback ends up getting sliced because Aaron Rodgers came here to do it. Will the Steelers go with 2 young unprovens behind him and Will Howard and Drew Aller? Will they give up on a 3rd-round pick instantly and Drew Aller? Seems unlikely. But, I really feel like it looks like it'd be Mason Rudolph and Drew Aller, or Drew Aller and Will Howard are competing for roster spots. But who knows? Maybe Mason Rudolph is the odd guy out. To me, it just seems a little strange to bring in Aaron Rodgers and then not have a good, you know, secondary plan. Because what happens if Rodgers, old age, gets hurt and is going to miss a month of the season? Do you really want to risk the whole season on a young guy who's never played in the NFL, which is both the options? Or do you want a proven competent backup like Mason Rudolph there? I feel like the Steelers historically have gone with that competent backup and one developmental guy. So who knows? Let's see how that plays out. But I'm going to give a shout out to whichever one of them is going to lose it here and, give it out to that. And then, of course, a belated shout out because last week I did it a little way too early and wasn't thinking about Mother's Day. But Mother's Day happened last weekend, so we'll go ahead and give a shout out to all the mothers out there, specifically the ones in my life, that being my mother, and of course, the mother to my children, my wife. So shout out there. I know it's a little belated. I do apologize, but just to let you know, it was not intentional. It's just sometimes I make a show on a Friday night and I'm not thinking about anything else. So sometimes I make it on a Sunday like I did this one. And it's like, oh, that makes so much more sense. But anyway, I am the Viking Donkey. It's Viking _ Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your daily dose of Donkey Ginger is an awesome YouTube channel where you get this content. Please let us know what you think of the Aaron Rodgers signing, any of the scheduling things that you think is interesting. And of course, Donk Nation, Steelers Nation, Jackson Jennets, wave them if you got them. Here we go.